Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder here with Run Blog Run. We are going to start a new Zoom program called The Art of Coaching. And our first participant is going to be Walt Drenth, who has been coaching since 1981. Many of you recall him in Arizona State up until 2004. And then he was at Michigan State. And in November of 2014, his women's team won the NCAA cross country, which I always thought was very, very cool. Walt, it's great to meet you.
Thanks. Great to have Great to be here.
Wanted to talk with you a little bit about how you got into coaching. Can you tell us how you started?
I probably I've been described as a gym rat. So I was in athletics since I was a little kid. If I could shoot basketball or throw a football or run or whatever I could do, how I got to coaching, it probably started when I was in high school. A couple of coaches complimented me on really helping people around me. I was always trying to encourage people to be better, and I think that was. I remember a guy named Gary Heiss actually saying to me, he's like, "You're really good at this." And it was sort of a surprising thing. And then I went, because I was a sports person and I ran, but where I'm from in Northern Michigan, when I was a kid, running was a seasonal. You just went to the next sport. It was basketball, cross country, like track and field, baseball, whatever was the next thing to do. And so I felt like I kind of probably consider myself more an athlete, except for I wasn't very big. When I graduated from high school, I weighed 125 pounds. So it was playing football was kind of out of the question. I was 5'2" and 85 pounds when I was a freshman in high school. And so I sort of thought, well, I'm going to become a teacher and I want to coach track and field and basketball. And ultimately got a graduate assistant's position at Central Michigan with Jim Knapp. And it sort of started from that's when it sort of I think I was more inclined for track and field than I was for basketball because I didn't you could see the political path and the work like in basketball. You have to be good. It's not to diminish what anybody's done in coaching, but it's a little bit of a different path. And in track and field, you can kind of see where the quality of your own work is going to be obvious. I don't know if it was because I don't know if that sounds selfish, but I guess you learning track and field and learning from track and field and cross country, success and failure fell right on your shoulders. So it sort of became probably naturally gravitated toward that idea.
What did you like about coaching cross country?
What's the best thing about cross? I love cross country. I don't think I like it more than track and field. When the kids would always say, "What's your favorite sport?" And I said, "What season are we in?" That was sort of my preference. I loved indoor track, I loved outdoor track, and I loved cross country. I think if there's virtues in one or the other, the virtue in cross country is in 2 hours you're done, right? Besides the cool down and the extra work after the race, there wasn't a ton of. It just didn't take all day. Track and field, I like the diversity of the sport. Frankly, I like all the events, every one of them, and so I think those are where the separations are in terms of which one do you like. Well, again, which season is it in?
When you're coaching in high school. And in college, obviously, indoor track and field, were you coaching all the events?
When I started coaching, I coached a lot of events. Yeah. I coached state champion in the high jump. I coached the high jumpers at Central Michigan when I started coaching. So I actually helped coach the throws at Ypsi High when I was there. So the answer is, I learned to coach. And I learned to coach a lot of events, and I learned the appreciation for a lot of events when I was coaching in high school.
What is the difference between coaching at the high school level and coaching at a small college level?
Small college. I think Central Michigan was Central Michigan and William and Mary were the smallest places I went. They're substantially different. I mean, for one thing, you have your year round. As
Sure.
soon as you go to college, it's sort of you sort of embrace the idea that this is the kind of athlete I am, and in order for me to be successful, I've got to do it all the time, or
Yeah.
with obvious rest breaks. But I think that's probably one of the big things. I think that maturation, you'd like to think that it was a little more advanced by the time they got to college. I'm not sure sometimes.
Sure.
When, uh, but yeah, I think what's the difference between high school? I mean, and you're I think you're also introducing kids to things in high school they may have never considered. Um,
Sure.
I also think that there's a in high school you've got like the longer you coach, the more you kind of look at kids and go, okay, that kid could be a thrower, that could be, and there's the when I first started coaching, especially in high school, the big kids went to become throwers, and the like the sizes sort of determined it. But now the longer I coach, the more I realize like a really athletic kid, a volleyball player or something, like why couldn't they throw the discus? They could throw the heck out of the discus or
Yeah.
whatever. So you look at them differently, and I think there's still that little bit of stereotype in high school kids where they think, well, if I'm big, I should be a thrower, and you ask me to be a thrower, I'm not that kind of big, like there's I don't know, like I think you're finding their niche is a little bit interesting, and you realize that a lot of the kids, I think the percentage of kids that are really in it because they want to be good at it it's almost an inverse or opposite relationship. Probably 10 to 15% of the kids in high school want to be good at it, and 85 are just there because their friends are there, and then probably the opposite in college.
When you get athletes to college, do you have to spend a lot of time helping them figure out their educational goals?
I mean, I tried to do that on the front end.
Yeah.
As we were recruiting them, if we didn't have a major a kid was interested in, like this is probably not a very good fit. I don't want to try to
Sure.
talk you into coming here to be something you're not. On the other hand, as an experienced adult, you recognize that 90% of the kids that are steadfast in what they're going to study when they get to college change their mind, and pretty soon after they get there. So you kind of have to weigh it. But I tried to be upfront, right? With kids, it's like, look, if you want to study a certain thing and we don't have it, that you probably shouldn't consider it, because I always felt like that was my primary role, was to help them. Not only my primary role, but one of my roles, big
Mhm.
roles, was to help them find the right fit, academically, athletically, all those things.
When in all of your college coaching, recruiting is a big part of the job now.
Yeah.
How did you feel doing recruiting?
Um, I mean, I think when I was young, I really liked it. I liked it for the most part throughout my career.
Mhm.
Um, I, you get to meet kids and you get to learn about people, and um, I thought that was kind of a cool thing. I mean, you don't get everybody you recruit, and you still develop a lot of relationships with people that may kind of reform in another time, or you don't know how that's going to work. But I enjoyed recruiting. Um, I think is the late stages of my career. I prob I had help with it, and I wouldn't say I stopped recruiting. That's not true at all. But I made fewer phone calls because I had people that did that for me. Um,
Sure.
but I was actively, anytime a kid was on campus, or I mean, I actively recruited every week. I just didn't sometimes make as many calls as when I was younger. Um, but I also think that the longer you coach, the more you recognize um, who's going to come right. You get a better sense of who are going to be the good fit. So like when I was younger, I'm like, everybody is going to be a good fit. And then
Mhm.
the longer you coach, the more you think, maybe that's maybe that's not true. So
Um, how did you go about uh, bringing Des Linden to Arizona?
Well, you should ask her that question. I mean,
Okay,
you know,
I will.
I recruited her. Yeah, I recruited her to come. And, you know, she was. I know she'd gotten recruited by a number of schools, and I know that it came down to us and Cal, UC
Okay,
Berkeley, and
sure.
I know that her sister had gone to Berkeley, and I know what she was interested in studying. Um, I think, yeah, I think that really at the end of the day, you'd probably have to ask her, but I think there was something appealing about our goals and the progress we'd made. Um, so I think that there was, you know, I think also was probably a little bit. Des and I have a lot of things that we kind of look at the world in a similar way, and one of them is like don't do the conventional. Um,
Yeah,
so you know, like I think that that's may have been part of hers. We had what she wanted to study, and again, I think she liked the team. She
yeah.
liked what we had to say and kind of our goals as a program.
I'm curious about the don't do the conventional. Um, when you were coaching at Arizona, how would you use don't do the conventional in your daily training with your athletes?
Well, we started before 6 a.m.
Okay.
I would say to start with that. We were done by 8:30. Uh, you know, you wouldn't think that Tempe, Arizona would be a great place to run, and
Hmm.
it was. That you just crossed the Rio Salada and you were in Papago Park. The long runs were done at out at South Mountain in the trails, and we found parks and places to run that they you know you could easily have looked at it like a concrete jungle, and we found places soft surface to run. Um, Maybe as more than any place I coached, we were able to run in
Uh,
soft surfaces. William and Mary might have been an exception to that, but
yeah.
in Central Michigan, there were a lot of dirt roads around there. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, it was not a conventional place. You don't think going to the desert to be a distance runner is one of those things people would think that's a natural fit. um, but it seemed to work out pretty well. We were able to have some success.
What was a basic week of training like for when you were coaching at Arizona for your 800 to say 10,000 kids?
I mean, so we met Monday through Friday.
Okay.
As we got close to the end of the season in cross country, I would try to give them a day off here and there so that they could, if it cooled off, they could run on their own and not have to get up early. I think one of the challenges there is that you're never off because as soon as you're off, as soon as you don't get up on time, the heat can be oppressive and so we did. So we tried to be a little bit flexible, and I also recognize that the toll of the heat could be something that would really wear us out at the end of the season. So I thought if we want to be, if our goal is to be rested and ready to be as competitive as we can be at the end, we had to make some concessions to the weather, and
Hmm.
so some of that was just okay. Like this Friday, we don't have a meet this weekend. We're not going to meet as a team. We might have a team meeting, but we're going to let you do your runs when you have a time to run. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Larry, but I've
No, it's
just
well, yeah, yeah. It's given me kind of the themes and the philosophy. Um, would you be
so
comfortable?
going back to your question,
Yeah,
every kid was different. I mean, the 800
yeah.
meter runners, there was different kinds of 800-meter runners. Um, I the volume, the number of days they ran, the length of their long runs, it was different for everybody.
Hmm.
So it wasn't really a formula as much as it was like how do we help each kid tick and where did they come from when they arrived to us. If they were high volume, then we had to kind of make sure that didn't go away. If they were low volume, we had to make sure that they didn't get overrun to begin with. If they
Sure.
didn't do long runs, I had some pretty I had some pretty good luck when I was younger in terms of seeing some unique things. I had, I had kids mature into events that they were told they would never be able to run. I had two really good 1,500-meter runners when I was at William and Mary. One made the Olympic team. One was the NCAA runner-up. And at the time, 3:37 was really fast back in the and Brian Hyde ran 3:34. He was a junior in college. And Brian could run 85 miles a week, run a regular long run, 16, 18 miles, never miss a day. Paul Vandegrift ran 3:37 and 1:46 or 1:47, and Paul was 6 days a week, and his long run was more. If it went more than 12, he would break.
Okay.
So you just sort of like you have to figure out how to make each one of them find their maximum without feeling like there's a formula. And for Paul, if he went to high volume, we just lost him, and you can't compete if you're hurt. So you gotta stay healthy to go. And
could you tell me what the quality days would you have athletes work together on their quality days?
So that evolved, but I think there was always some common threads there. Depending upon the length of the workout, what our goals were, we would have people from, we would try to run kids in groups, but they wouldn't necessarily run with a group one day that they were training with another. For example, If we were running threshold, we have kids that were really good at certain intensity work that they could adapt to. Some that weren't maybe very good at threshold, and so I would, so we would have if we were running short bouts of exercise, for example, kids that weren't fast wouldn't necessarily run with kids that they would compete with on it because the cost of the fast running was different for them than it was for someone else. So we tried to look at every workout and mix and match the kids based on where their strengths were and what they were going to get out of the workout. And we did that through most of my career. Cross country was a little bit different because we tried to put, because you're trying to do some things, but even still, if you came to a practice, you could see, especially when I started coaching both genders, you could see as many as 12, 16 groups doing variations of the same thing. The volume might be slightly different. The pace might be slightly different, but they were all kind of doing similar things. And we would mix and match based on their strengths and weaknesses. So if we were going to run thousands, for example, you could see, or 1200s. It just depends on the length of the workout. Everybody, they would get moved around, and we tried to log everything that they did, so we would have reference points for what they were doing, and if we made some mistakes, we could adjust their group or their pace or their volume or whatever, and then we would also have sort of reference points from the previous year or the previous season or whatever, so that if they weren't making progress, what did we do differently that when they were making progress, we could look at a lot of variables to kind of sort through that information.
When you were at Arizona, were you the sole coach with the distance runners, or did you have an assistant working?
Yes, I was at Arizona State. I was the coach. I had a graduate assistant. We had some really good graduate assistants, Jason Dunn, and then Corey Immels, and then Louis Quintana, and then Louis Quintana. So all wow, they did a great job. Yeah,
I remember Louis in high school, so because I was coaching out at Bellarmine in California.
Oh,
yeah, Louis is a very wonderful young man, and
he'd done a great job at Oregon State.
Yeah. Do you get a kick out of seeing some of your athletes develop into coaches?
Super cool.
Louis?
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. If you were talking to a group of young coaches, what would you tell them about things? Well, I'm going to try this one. What was the biggest assumption you made as a young coach that you found you had to revise?
That everyone was as competitive as I was,
Okay. Or,
and right, and I had to revise that pretty
mhm.
quickly, because it it's just something you learn that I think that a lot of successful coaches are probably wired um, almost inappropriately competitive, and
Yeah.
learning to manage that. But I would say probably the first piece of advice I would try to tell a young person. Well, there's a few, but one would be, don't every kid is different. Don't coach to a formula. Have a philosophical plan, develop a philosophy, but understand that every kid's different. So you have to coach them maybe a little bit differently. You have to treat them maybe a little bit differently, and then don't have it be about you. Like, to me anyway, I felt like it was important that it was their running, it was their program, um,
Sure.
and of course I was hired to have teams be successful, and so then I rather you're trying to balance all that stuff, but trying not to have it be about me. I mean, no, I don't, I didn't want to lose my job, but I also didn't want to have a team come out and have it be Walt Drenth's team. I wanted to have it be, you know, Leo Connor's team or Priscilla Hines' team, or like I wanted the team to be reflective of the kids on the team, or Caleb Reinhardt's team, or like Paul Vandegrift's team or Brian Hyde's team. That's sort of how I wanted it to be theirs, not
Sure.
not mine.
Okay. Okay. Um, when you went to Michigan State and your young women won the NCAA, how early in that season did you know you had a special group?
Um, Honestly, their
Yeah.
freshman year,
Wow. Wow.
we Kim Agrivia and I recruited. Kim is now an FBI agent, but she and I recruited a number of those kids,
Yeah.
and they came to camp. And Kim had already known that she was leaving for the FBI by the time we started camp. And
Okay.
so Lisa Senekevich, who had run for me and had a great career, was an All-American. She was third at the Nationals at 5,000 meters. She was All-American in cross country, and on very successful teams. We we were there, and they came in with this kind of energy and sense of purpose that was really pretty remarkable. And
Mhm.
we tried to at camp to separate each group, um, each gender, each group, each. So the men and the women would meet separately. Then we would meet with each class, and we told them then, like, you have something unique here, and it could be really, really special. Now, did we define that as you can win the national championship? Absolutely not. Um,
Mhm.
but we knew that there was a very unique group of kids. And one of the things that made them unique at the NCAAs was, um, had one of them not gotten hurt. Sarah Stassen, she was 24th at the region as our seventh person that year. Had she not gotten hurt, that team would have been entirely from Michigan. Um,
Wow.
that's really unique, and one of the things
Yeah.
that makes it super special. And the woman that replaced her was an NCAA qualifier. I think she was a Olympic trials finalist in the steeple, Katie Landwehr, and Katie was from Ohio. She was only like 3 hours away, so it was a tight radius of kids. It wasn't like we were getting kids from all over the country or these exotic spots, and so that made it really special that they were such a tight group, and they knew of each other if they didn't know each other when they were in high school. That made it pretty cool too.
Did they work out together most of the time?
Yep, very similar to what I mentioned earlier, and sometimes in separate groups based on what their strengths and weaknesses were.
Yeah.
They did a lot of runs together, and sometimes we had to separate them. But for the most part, they did a really good job of not trying to kill each other,
Yeah.
which is hard to do when you have a really competitive team. I mean, the men are any better at that than the women. I think the women are as bad. They can be as bad at it when they get competitive.
Yeah.
And I don't even know sometimes if it's they're like deliberately trying to kill their teammates, but the competitiveness kicks in and off they go.
Yeah. I remember my college coach, we would, there was two of us running the 10. So say it was a 20 times a 400, we'd be doing that. He'd have the 800 and 1500 kids come in as he saw them and then pull them out. Would you change workouts on a fly? So like your kids are
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
okay. All right. I'm just curious about that.
Absolutely.
What were you doing? Were you just watching them as they ran, seeing how they were recovering? What kind of assumptions were
Little
you
bit of
making?
all of that. I think, like I don't want diminishing return. I never want like there were times when you had to go to, especially with the half milers, they have to feel they have to feel not just the cardiovascular system, but their nervous system has to feel that really high rate of intensity in a work. And sometimes you get a little bit of diminishing return, but for the most part, when you're doing volume of work, diminishing return is as soon as they start to get worse, it's like you have to pull the plug. And in best laid plans, I'm old enough to remember Arthur Lydiard, and
Sure.
Arthur's he would do these clinics all over the all over the country. And a friend of mine, who's since deceased, his name was Kermit Ambrose, and Kermit was a high school coach in Michigan, and we became friends. Kermit had cassette tapes of an entire whatever. There were like 7 or 8 of these cassette tapes, so it was 8 to 10 hours of Arthur Lydiard talking. Um, and I remember him saying, like, come back the next day. Like, why would you pound the kid a person into the ground? Give him another day. If you see it, you got to be smart enough to say, okay. And that kind of goes back to my point of what would I tell you? Like, if you write a workout and you're committed to that idea that workout has to be done on this day, then it really becomes part of, I think it's like it becomes an ego thing as a
Sure.
coach. And
Yeah.
if you're looking at your athletes in their best interest, you have to think, am I getting out of this what I wanted to? And if the answer is yes, keep going. And if the answer is no, pull the plug and try it again. There's no magic formula. But you have to have a great trust in your athletes, and they have to trust you, because, we all have athletes that will go, if I can get off the hook here, I'm going to get off the hook, and so you have to know who those people are too, because I don't know, when late in my career here, we were doing this, they were trying to set up a matrix, the strength and conditioning staff, for fatigue and whether or not somebody was ready to go. And I said, the people that don't want to do it are going to tell you they're really tired, and the people that want to do it are going to tell you they're not very tired. And it may be different in other sports. But in track and field, for sure, the kids that want to do it, you have to be the voice of reason, because they're going until they can't. And so at least that was my experience. And
Sure.
I think the culture. I think I was really lucky to be around kids almost my entire career where the culture was team first, and recognizing that within the team structure there were going to be extraordinary individuals, and they bought that, and you can kind of see how we traveled and competed. We didn't go all over the country. I felt like once I got back to Michigan State, we started to go to we were going to Stanford a couple times, and I thought we came back and we were just wore out, and it took us a few. Like, what's the end objective? The end objective is to score a lot of points at the conference meet, or as many as you can, and then go to the regionals and the nationals and make the NCAA championships. And because I would tell people, like, if you win, you're going to get noticed. And so the team, the athletes that I coached, they believed that. So we ran a lot of faster times at the end, and I think that had to do with their belief that it was more important. They believed what I believed, and that was it was more important to be good in championship than it was to run a fast time in late March or early April. And that's not to say you're not trying to do it all.
Sure.
But
You had success at many distances. I'm fascinated with your success at the steeplechase. Can you tell me how that came about?
Well, it was yeah, that's a good question. I think um, I had really good biomechanics teachers or professor at Central Michigan when I was in graduate school.
Mhm.
Um, I we started back when I was coaching at William and Mary. Um, I learned from John Cook uh,
Yeah.
hurdle mobility. Like we did a lot of hurdle mobility and a
Okay.
lot of so we did it as exercise. We did it as strength work. We did it. It fills in a lot of things, and you start to recognize who's actually athletic enough to do the
Yeah.
hurdle mobility with some kind of effectiveness, and that
Sure.
probably gets you started. Like for me, it was like, okay, the observation here is this person's comfortable and they're athletic enough and fearless enough that we can start with that, and then recognizing that there's a couple of different ways to come in at the steeple. Like there's some kids that they're going to be better they're better short distance runners, and then there's some that are better at five. I think a great steepler is probably good between 1,500 or 800 and 5,000 meters. Um,
Sure.
but I mean, so I was able to teach the hurdles. I was exposed to Coach Hislop
Yeah. Chick Kissel.
at Weber
Yep.
State. I thought he did, and Patrick Shane, because I
Yep.
remember going to a meet in California, and the women's steeple hadn't even really become an event, and they were putting a platform up, so they'd have to step up onto it and then onto the barrier and into the water because most of the barriers didn't go down to 30 inches. Um,
Sure.
so I think that once the kid, I also think that once the athletes see that you have some success in that event, some of them are like, "Hey, teach me how to steeple. I want to be good at this." And so you get a buy-in. I don't know. It's hard to know for sure, but I think that's kind of like a number of things like that probably had an influence on it.
Yeah. I put Carlo Borovica on my cover of American Athletics in '92. It's the first time I put a woman steepler on, and I'd had a woman vaulter the issue before. And the coach at Penn State sent me this note. He goes, "Dear God, Larry, you put a woman steepler on the cover. The next
That's
thing you know,
Harry,
you're
right?
gonna have a yeah, you're gonna have a woman vaulter." But then he tells me he went to his mother-in-law's house and picked up the copy of the magazine, and he didn't like his mother-in-law. So I knew it was okay. It's very, coaches. It's like, Chick Hislop and Patrick. I mean, you're talking about some of the greats. Hislop had Farley Gerber, and then I think that kid ran an 8:18 off 30 miles a week, which just blew my mind.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing where, like you said, that every athlete is different. Remember, Coach
Right.
Bowerman had one of his 4-minute milers. He had swimming 3 days a week. The guy couldn't do over 24 miles a week on his feet without getting hurt. And I was fascinated with how he was able to put that together. But it's
Yeah.
that part of coaching we're talking about that kind of keeps it fun, I think.
It does. It does.
What would you
I actually have a photo. My brother was in the Olympic trials in 1984 when I think Farley ran 8:16,
okay,
and
yep.
it. I think that Brian Deemer, Henry Marsh, and I think Farley Gerber made the Olympic team. I think those were the three Olympians in the steeple that year, and I have a picture at the start of everyone taking a step forward except for Farley, and he was going behind them. He was good, like he knew it was going to go out fast, and he just like, I'm going over here.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
I'm like, wow, there you go. So
That was a fun trials. I loved that trials. That
yeah,
was really
it
a
was.
fascinating one to watch.
Yeah,
There was such a time in U.S. running where they seemed to think that the steeplers were the kids who couldn't run a 2 mile or couldn't run a mile. And then I started, I'm hanging out in Europe and I'm watching like Malinowski, the Polish guy who could run a 3:37, 13:14, 27:53, and he was doing 140 miles a week, but he was doing all this hurdle stuff. And then I met
right.
Mark Rowland, and Rowland could run a intermediate hurdle 400 hurdles because he said he had to learn how to do that before he could really steeple well. And I was fascinated with that. Did you have your steeplers learn how to do short hurdle races as well, or train them over?
We didn't do short hurdle races, but we did some. They hated it, and then we'd get the competition, and they would love it. We would do these. We would do like 300s and 200s at the end of workouts near the end of the season, and I would put them in. I put the hurdles in weird places. They'd have to go over the water, but I'd put them in weird places. So they would. So what we were doing is they were running fast, and they were coming up on hurdles at unpredictable distant places, and having to learn to hurdle over it and keep running. And they were like, "Oh, this sucks, coach." And I'm like, "Yeah." And then we would get to, when we would get into the meet, and they would be running, and all of a sudden they'd have to pull out wide, and there was a hurdle. And they were able to, pretty luck. Fortunately, most of them were able to navigate it pretty good.
That's cool.
And they said that they felt like it helped that unpredictability of it. So who knows?
In looking back at coaching at Arizona and at Michigan, you're talking about having your athletes prepared for the big meets. If you were talking to a group of young coaches, what would you tell them to always keep in their minds when they're working on with their athletes during the entire season to be prepared for the end of the season?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. That's okay. Probably. I guess, what are your primary objectives at the end of the season? I think that you have to think about it in those terms. Like,
okay,
if an athlete is going to go to its championship meet, what's the best state they need to be in? Well, they need to be rested, they need to be healthy, and they need to be fit. At some point, that you have to be able to bring all those things together, and there are certainly exceptions to every rule, but you can't have them be special all year round. Now I would say that now we're seeing maybe that like Grant Fisher's, like but he's also a mature athlete, right? I mean, Grant has been at it for a while, and I think that you're able to sustain things a little longer as you get older. I think that's maturation is a huge component in this, and I think that when for what's good for a kid as a freshman or a sophomore, if they're really competitive and successful, is not going to necessarily be the same formula that works for them as juniors and seniors. You should be able to theoretically do more. Like my nephew was a runner, and he got stress fracture, and he was afraid. He was afraid to do what he'd done last year to get a stress fracture. I'm like, whoa, time out. You're bigger, you're stronger, you've been running, like all these things. Like, you can't say that the same variables exist with you physically that did last year. And so you have to think, you can't be afraid of something that happened to you before if you're evolving as an athlete, right? I mean, you can be smart and you can use markers as, okay, I started to feel like this, or I like whatever variable you think may have contributed to the injury. But saying, well, at this point in the season, I got hurt last year, I can't do the things I did last year. You're not the same person. So I think that, I don't know. I probably digressed there, but
no, I like that. Thank you very much. We've got about 15 minutes left. Are you okay with your time right now?
You're good. I've got time.
Oh,
so
thank you.
We can go over.
This is really fun. I want to talk. I know Des Linden pretty well. Okay. And Des made me famous after the New York City Marathon when I asked her if she had bourbon or whiskey to celebrate. And she looked at me and she goes, straight face, she goes, Larry, bourbon is whiskey. I got 500,000 retweets on it. And Brooks made a shirt with it. I wore it at the trials in 20 and asked her, we just have fun. And she's one of my favorite human beings besides being a great athlete. But I want to use her as an example. And I want just a little bit, if you would be willing to share about coaching her. When she was a college athlete, did you think that she was an exceptional athlete?
I thought she was unique because
Okay.
she was she had range. She was a good half miler. She was good in cross country. So, but are you asking me if I thought she was going to be a multiple time Olympian and a Boston Marathon champion? I don't think anybody could predict that at that age.
Sure. Sure.
I mean, and she said it. Um, she she said it on more than one. She said I was really good at being a college student. Um, she
Yeah.
was a good student. She didn't miss um, out on a ton of things. That's not to say she wasn't undisciplined, but
Yeah.
running was a priority. But it wasn't like it wasn't the thing that drove her like it did during most of her post collegiate career.
Because she ran like what, 16, 15, 16, 20 at the 5 and what, 34 and change in a 10?
That sounds about right. See, I coached her through her sophomore year. I remember telling her after the trials that if this was before I left to go to, this was in 2004.
Yeah.
I, I said, if you want to be good, it may have been at the NCAAs. I don't remember. It must have been at the NCAAs. I said, if you want to be good at this, you could be really good at this. So
Yeah.
it's going to be up to you. And then it wasn't that long after that. We chose to go back to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
It would sort of caught us off guard, to be honest with you, going back to Michigan. But yeah, I don't. I mean, there are athletes that I can tell you I would pick out have been extraordinary that never became that. So it's easy for me to say I can't predict. You can't predict. I mean,
Sure.
the collegiate kids, like you can tell, like you knew Brian High was going to be really good.
Yeah.
But you can't predict. He ended up with a degenerative disc in his back, and his career was never really got going. His fast running as a junior was really cut short by his back.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately,
When you coached, you're coaching Des now.
yeah.
It's a whole different approach, I would suspect.
Well, it's different than when I started helping her too. When I started helping her, we were trying to do things. Now I would say I'm more of a sounding board.
Mm-hmm.
She's at the tail end of her career and she has a lot of experience. And I always believed that was probably as important as anything for an athlete. I had to lean on what they knew, what she knew. So I'm not really coaching her as much as I'm helping her navigate her workouts and her plan. And she's like, I'm thinking about this. And I would say, what about, I would say, let's figure out your long run sequence and let's see where it fits in. And I think it's a lot different now than it was. And when I first started helping her, and I'm sure a lot different than when she was running with the Hansons because she was different stages of her career.
Sure.
And those guys they did an amazing job with her.
Yeah, no, it was her development. I've got to see every one of her marathons but one, and all her track stuff. And I've tried to follow her when she went to Italy, did some cross country. I had photographers there because I'm a big believer.
I missed that. When she went to Italy, what?
She ran a couple cross country races over there, and I made sure there's a photographer there because I wanted people to see that she was still doing cross country, doing track stuff, and doing the marathon, and it was important,
Right.
And I was trying to respect that. I want to ask you some questions about. You brought up mature athletes. The 10,000 meters, I think, is one of the toughest events in track and field. I call it a moving chess game. Do you like seeing your college kids run a 10, or would you prefer them to wait?
Well, we seldom ran young college athletes at 10,000 meters.
Okay.
I know people have had a lot of success doing it. Some have had success, some haven't. I always felt like they needed to learn to race before they started running at 10,000 meters because
Sure.
I wanted them to go in with the idea that it was a competition, not a run. and that's probably that just may be the
Yep.
competitiveness in me, but I think one of the traps that track and field distance runners in particular fall into is the idea that a PR is the most important thing. I think
Mhm.
like competitive, like if you play, like I always, when I was recruiting kids, I like to recruit kids that were in other sports because I like to find kids that learn to win or tried to win. The objective
Yeah.
of the soccer game is to outscore the opponent. And I wanted or basketball or whatever. I wanted them to take that mentality into their running. And so I think for me that was a big thing, was to teach the kids to go to 10,000 meters when they were ready to race, and from start to finish. Now, and that's not to say that it was, you're gritting your teeth and you're banging it out, because 10,000 meters is a race where you don't really want to start racing until you get closer to the end. You want to be
Sure.
running fast, but you don't want it to be like, passing and getting past, and like you don't want anything frantic early. You want it to be as calm as possible, but you also don't want them to thinking, well, if I just run a little bit faster than I did last time, it'll be great. I want them to think, well, nobody. I hate to say it. No, I don't hate to say it. This is like, you don't go to the Olympics and people say, well, how'd you do? How'd you do? Well, I ran a PR. And they want to know what place you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I sort of felt like that was like, what place did you get was more important than how fast you ran. And if you were concerned about what place you got, ultimately you were going to run fast because you had to be able to brag about your place.
Well, that's in observing NCAA championships. It's all about the racing, and the kids who do well seem to want to win, and they know how to behave in that extraordinary situation. Um,
Yeah.
how do you talk to your athletes before an NCAA championship?
Um, what we try to do, and this has got refined. So if an athlete that I coached a long time ago hears this, it would certainly not sound like it does now. But I think the idea was still there. Is like you look at every race as an opportunity to learn something, and so when you go to a competition, you apply what you learned. And we try to have the championships be the culmination of everything you've learned through the course of the year or the course of your career. Like instead of creating a list of things that you didn't do well, create a list of things you do differently. So it was kind of a constant learning process. And the team that won the national championship really embraced that. Many teams embraced that, but they really embraced it. And we would do race plans, and I would read them. Coach Stankiewicz would read them, and then when we were done, we would give them back to the kid when the race was done, and we would give them back to him. And we go, well, we want to reread them, but we want a list of 5 things you did well and 5 things you do differently. So they were so going into the championship, it was more of an application of what you've learned, and then you have to, as a coach, you have to talk about what your strategic options are. There's so many unknown variables, but you're trying to set them up with some ideas so that they can react or respond or be the best version of themselves in the championship, and then you just say I don't want to say I took the pressure off them. They were athletes. They wanted the pressure. They didn't, it wasn't
Sure.
like it wasn't like they did. But there was never any do or die environment for us. I don't think.
Yeah.
They might tell you differently, but I don't think there was. Um, I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like
I think you did. I think it.
Okay.
How did you know it was time for you to retire from coaching?
I had some health problems that I
Okay.
had to deal with, and I couldn't walk away
All right.
and I couldn't solve those problems and keep coaching. And so really it was a tough confluence of things. And to be candid with you, I had a blood pressure problem that they couldn't sort out. And it kind of went from not a problem to a real problem. And so I didn't feel like I should take a sabbatical. It was during COVID. I don't even know if a sabbatical was an option, to be honest with you. It was hard because I was trying to figure it out on my own, and my wife was trying to, she was trying to help me get through it, and there wasn't really anybody. There wasn't really anybody to talk to how to, like, what should I do? And so you kind of wrestling with it, and I thought the most important thing was I didn't want to keel over because I couldn't solve this, and I had some doctors tell me, "Oh, this happens," and I'm like, I don't think it happens like this. Everything that I've read, and it turned out that I was honestly, I saw a friend of mine who is a sleep specialist, and he said, "Come see me. I think I can help you." And almost all of the problems I had were resolved once I saw him.
Yeah. I had,
and I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying that for anybody to feel sorry for. It's like cautionary tale. Like, just go ask somebody. Like, I'm really lucky that I was able to find somebody that was able to help me. And I think, but walking away from coaching at the time. Now, in retrospect, the timing was probably pretty good because things have changed a lot. And I don't know. I feel like one of my big goals was to be a relationship environment. And I felt like a lot of our success had to do with relationships and trust. And I don't know how you sustain that when you say you set up a level of expectation for an athlete and they don't like it, so they leave. It wasn't that long ago you set up an expectation and they didn't like it, and then ultimately they became your best captains. Many of them, right? I mean, I can start with Harry Groves. You mentioned Harry earlier in the thing, but when I coached at William & Mary, Harry was the coach at William & Mary well before me. And John Randolph was my AD when I was at William & Mary. And Harry told me he's like, John was one of the most difficult people I ever had to coach. And he became my best captain. He said, we went like this so many times, butting heads. And he said, and ultimately he became the best captain. One of the best captains I ever had. And that, like, it's really hard to do that in this environment. Kids jump ship or whatever they do. And, the playing field has never been level, but now it's going to be less level with all the things that are going on. And I'd be very frustrated. I'm sure of that.
Would you be willing to give me an opinion on NILs?
I mean, I don't have a negative opinion about them. I think that
I do too. I'm concerned.
I feel like they're this is the thing when this started coming up and I was still coaching. My concern was really for track and field in the Olympic sports. There's not an infinite amount of money, so people start donating their money or giving kids their money, representing a car dealership or a watch company or whatever it is, or vitamin supplements or whatever it is. That money doesn't go to that money doesn't go to the athletic department. I don't know if NIL and track and field. I mean, their big schools are going to have it. I don't know about. This is just going to be a greater and greater separation between the haves and have-nots. And if that's okay with the schools that have all the money, that they're going to be competing against a really small number of schools, then that's the way it's going to be. If they truly wanted national championship, then I think we've got to be a little cautious about how we go about allocating scholarships and allocating money. I don't think NIL in reality is a problem. I think that the portal's a bigger problem than NILs myself.
Okay. No, I think you're right. I'm just learning about that. I don't even have enough information to check. I just see the amount of money coming in, and every day I get a new press release from a brand who's picked up 5 or 6 kids, and it's one thing that they're college kids, but the majority of them now are high school, and this is totally flipping me out.
Well, the high school part bothered me because Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if the kid has a chance to make money, you can't really argue about that, I
No,
guess.
and
But
they,
what
you
is
know,
it
if they
going
can
to
pay
do
for
for their?
school or some of the other things, because it's getting so expensive, but it's still, I was talking to, Julie Henner, who,
I know Julie.
yeah.
Julie was at she was at James Madison running when I was at William and Mary.
Oh, cool. Yeah, she's coaching NIL kids, and I asked her this weekend, and she does not mince words. And she said, "Larry, some of it's good, some of it's challenging. I don't think the kids." She goes, "They're making more than I did as an Olympian, and it's blowing her mind." And uh, it will even itself out, but there will be damage done before it evens itself out, and that's my concern. How many kids get hurt by
I think it. Well, I think that. I think that the NIL money and the paying of the football and basketball players is going to ultimately be the demise of a lot of Olympic sport programs across the country. In different sports, it's going to be the priority of the AD. I think all those things are. I think all those things are going to be true. I think that it's going to be hard to figure out how to reinvigorate. It's going to be recalibrate track and field, because it's going again. It's going to be a few schools with a lot of money that are going to be pretty successful. But I don't know, participation. When fewer kids get to participate, I don't know. I think that it's going to be good for the Division II and III schools. I think I wonder if the water will come back to level. If the developmental kids and the kids that end up being Olympians will come from just Division II and III schools now. And maybe you'd like to think so. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, Walt, you survived almost an hour with me. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it, and you sharing your thoughts with us. This is Larry Eater with RunBlogRun. We're featuring Walt Drenth in the art of coaching. Thank you again for watching.
Thanks for having me.